there. They're just wishing to properly plat the property and along with a waiver for the lot width. The R40 zoning that it has requires 150 feet and they only have 132 feet. So they require a plat waiver as well.
So it's already zoned R40,
Yes,
and this is just to approve the plat
that is
with
correct.
that deviation.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Questions?
Our next case was tabled from the November meeting, November 12th. This was to amend the PUD for the village at Colleyville to allow for the prayer room, which is across the street, to locate in a suite along Main Street.
Excuse me, what do you mean across the street? What-
They're currently located across the street, across 26.
Okay.
They have a current location and they're wishing to move to this location, and to do that,
Jackie, I go back to that map. Currently, at the
Right.
building, there's a couple of spaces just right here.
Okay.
So yeah, almost literally across the street on Colleyville Boulevard.
we don't have any updates, but I did speak with the pastor and he will be in attendance this evening. I do think he was flying back from South America, so if everything works and his plane is on time, he should be here.
Jackie, can you go back, sorry? Where is suite 100?
It's inside this building.
Because I tried to get into it, I couldn't. Okay.
Yeah, it's located in there, and I know that as a part of their lease agreement to meet building code standards, that they are also going to, they'd have to construct a bathroom, but that's
How big
Building
is,
permit.
how big is the
the
lot,
space.
the premises?
Well, go back.
It's point something, 0.
Yeah, it's the suite itself, I'm looking to see. Well, it's 0.08 acres if that helps, so it's not a big space. But it is located in that, would be located in that building if it were to be approved. Let me go to the language. So the existing PUD has all this language, what's allowed, what isn't. And what's being proposed this evening is to allow for this specific use under this category, religious institution use, including but not limited to ministry, Bible studies, and religious counseling, which is what their current operations are at their current location.
So Jackie, in thinking about that language, it does indicate religious institutional uses. If that's too broad, we can actually narrow that down to be very specific and say it is limited to ministry, Bible studies, and religious consulting if you feel that's more appropriate.
Based on what I know, and based on the fact that there were citizens concerned about the use of the parking spaces, that could not become a church because it wouldn't be adequate for, a full-blown, it wouldn't be adequate parking or space really. But I would think that limiting to ministry, Bible studies, and religious consulting would make sense. I don't know. I want to hear from him
Sure.
first, but I think there has to be some limitation due to the size and the citizens' concerns about parking. Also realizing that was a storefront before they lived there.
Right.
So the parking doesn't belong to them, but certainly it's for their use if the merchants are using. Okay.
The language is really expansive.
Yeah, the language as written is wide open, so we would have to change that, and which that's totally fine.
But I would
Left it
say,
a little open just to make sure we had that conversation. But we can make it very explicit and say limited to.
yes.
What are what are the current parking restrictions there? I just wanna look at it from the perspective of if, a movie theater would already be allowed business offices, a school, daycare centers, all of those things, are there specific parking restrictions outside of?
No, I mean, we just follow our land development code regulations, so general office is 1 space per 300 square feet. Retail is 1 space per 200 square feet. There's restaurants that are allowed, which is 1 space per 100 square feet. Churches are generally based on occupancy of the main sanctuary. But if we limit it to the ministry, Bible studies, and religious consulting, that's more probably closer to office, so 1 space per 300 square feet. And in the village, it's on-street parking as well as off-street parking. And since we've got some larger parking lots, pretty much
Could
the entire
accommodate.
village is considered adequately parked.
If we're gonna limit it more, however, I'm a little concerned about a specific reference to Bible studies, because that's more attuned to one particular kind of religion.
That's a good point.
The
It
one
could
thing
be-
is more broad and it says including but not
That's what you're
limited to,
saying.
but.
Maybe scripture study, or I don't know if that's
Yeah,
a more broad topic.
I think
About
They-
religious studies, maybe?
the key thing I think we need to be aware is that we have more than about 350,000 religious groups in America. All right. Are we saying that any one of them can rent the office space?
Yes, based on this
Then-
language, yes.
Well, is that something we want to go into? Is that something, it seems to me,
I would recommend no.
right,
Maybe I'm not following.
no,
Well, exactly.
what I'm saying is, this ordinance was passed in 2012, I guess,
Yes.
Yes.
right? At that particular time, they excluded religious groups. Right, can someone tell me why they did that? Because there probably are many reasons why they did that. Right, so we're now trying to amend it to include religious groups. So I'm saying, I think we have to look ahead. I know why I'm saying that, but we really need to look ahead and say, okay, we're doing it for this specific church, right? But they are, like I said, more than 350,000 something. You don't know what they are. We cannot refuse them either. They can tell you, well, I'm gonna conform to that. So I'm just wanna make sure everyone is aware of that there is a reason why it wasn't there in the first place.
Well, if it was considered in the first place, we don't know.
That's my
I think we can assume that it was, because otherwise, outside of this PUD, you can basically put a church anywhere, and yet when they put together this particular project, they excluded that.
So,
I mean, I would have to assume that's correct.
But when that RLUIPA law came into effect, it was after 2012, I believe, so the timing's a little, yeah.
I mean, there's a couple ways we could do it. Either just say it's limited as a use by right. We can also say that it has to go through the special use permit process too. And that way, each one would have to come in and get approved.
But then if you do that, you're putting the city in a very awkward position
Right,
of
right.
including of approving one religion but
Yes.
not another.
and that is not good, that cannot be good. So, is that,
The other
that is
option
not what,
is-
that is not what we want in Colleyville, let me just put it that way.
The other option would be deny the amendment and it's not allowed.
And then they'll just have to.
What is the situation with the lease situation? What's the lease situation now in the villages? I went
Occupancy
through
rates?
today and yesterday, all the 5 videos on the 2012 issues. I didn't hear religion mentioned once, but I heard an awful lot about how retail was having problems. So do we need to expand the what I'll call the retail uses, the non-residential uses, because of economic reality?
So you're saying that wasn't a consideration at that time?
Well, not in
you heard.
2012.
That you-
We don't have the videos going back to 1998. But it was not discussed at all. The whole 2012 situation was regarding the fact that economically speaking, the villages were not doing well, primarily because retail was not doing well. There was a market for the townhouses and they wanted to increase the number of townhouses. There was sort of a market for the condominiums, although not as good as the townhouses, but retail was just falling on its face. And I'm wondering if what has changed in the last 12 years, if anything?
I'm just making a guess, probably not much has changed. I think there is still, I don't know what the best way, I think there is desire that we would see more retail come in, but I don't know that we've seen that.
But one thing with respect to the applicant, there's this issue that was raised about how early in the morning they have something going on, and I'm interested in hearing what that is, 6 o'clock in the morning. I did a little tour around the neighborhood before coming in tonight, and just in the same building, there's a little exercise place that opens at 6 a.m. So I don't think that's fair to hold that against this applicant, even though it seems, I wouldn't like that if I lived in a multi-use facility, somebody starting at 6 a.m., but there already is somebody starting at 6 a.m.
My guess would be before work, if they have like a little prayer meeting or something like that on a regular basis.
I found on their website that they have on 2 days a week at 6 a.m. a men's Bible study. I imagine it's men who work coming before work.
Before work.
But I know that the two people that complained the last time, they complained about parking and hours.
So a little bit of history, Claudia has lived here that long, there was a little less than perfect situation when the villages of Colleyville came about. It was supposed to be this grand shopping living, much like South Lake Town Center.
Yeah.
And South Lake Town Center took off because 1709 and 114. And then, we had the 08 real estate bust, and Colleyville was big lots, and people didn't think about these townhomes. They were, for the longest time, you could pick them up for a song. It's about probably 8-9 years ago, some city employees were buying them as investment properties because they had the inside information. It was alleged. So in terms of the use, there used to be a restaurant at 62 Main that stayed open late. So people could be coming home from work and not find parking. See, and then the other thing that Sarah and I had mentioned briefly last time is religious institutions are allowed in any district. We shouldn't restrict it by PUD. And I think you get into some issues, and there's some case law on that, you had said.
Well, as Jackie mentioned, like really bad, like it basically you cannot treat a religious institution differently than you would any other applicant, right? Just because, you can't discriminate against it because it's a religious use.
Right.
So you have to, and with regards to zoning, this is what I always say about all cases, right? It's not just with regards to this one, is stick to the specific issues with regards to zoning issues and planning issues, like y'all were talking about, the parking situation. But if you look at how would this be differentiated from the entertainment uses that are allowed, like the movie theaters and bars and restaurants and all of those things that are already allowed by right? What would the city be doing with regards to ensuring that the parking and hours of operation were restricted on those uses? So treat this same type of use the way you would the other uses.
Well, if we're doing that, then there's really not any conflict for what they're asking.
Right, but we are being asked to amend, correct? It's not there yet, so we have to make that decision, is that not right? Yes?
Religious institutions have a greater protection under the First Amendment and
Well-
under RLUIPA as well, so.
So you're saying that we should not even be discussing this, that you should just go through, that they should just go and
No, I'm not
approve
saying
the
that, I'm
amendment.
saying that I don't think that you should be and I don't think that you necessarily are, when you're talking about the parking issues and the things like that, like, if they're asking, if you wanna ask them those questions and see what might need to happen with regards to protecting that, but I think it has to be the very least restrictive means to protect those specific zoning issues, because you're looking at the constitutional right to worship.
It wouldn't, and that would not make any difference if it was a, breakfast shop or, it wouldn't make any difference.
Sarah, but are we preventing them from worshiping if we deny this?
No,
Okay, all right, good, thanks.
David, before you came in, we talked about the fact that the Land Development Code provides for religious use in
Yes.
across the board, but yet, nevertheless, when this particular project, whose use list supersedes that, was created, for whatever reason, they decided not to include religious institutions as a permitted use.
No, I absolutely, and that was my understanding, but I also came with the impression it's just something that no one thought of at the time. Oh, we want to have a religious institution. If you said religious institution, because the prayer room's over in that little strip center over there now, you think of a church, and there's really, you don't think about that the way this is laid out physically. But the analogy I also think is when we get into these situations where a district is zoned R20 and they have an R40, we have to let them split it by law. And I think it's not an apples to apples, but it's a very close analogy is we allow them in all other districts, the PUD, any PUD that comes before us should not exclude a religious organization either. For that reason and also for the constitutional reasons. And I think the parking argument is perhaps one of the weakest because there is plenty of parking here. Now, it may not be convenient, somebody may have to walk a few steps further, but there's plenty of parking in the village.
And parking is not, I don't think, for me, it's not a consideration because those storefronts have been there from the very beginning. And it was intended to be used as commercial space. So those parking spaces are for the commercial people. If you have a home, I'm sure you're allotted a space, but they're not assigned spaces and anyone can park anywhere in the village in the open spaces. You can't park in someone's driveway, but you can park in any of the public parking area. So it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I would like for everybody to have plenty of parking for all their guests that come and, there are multiple cars and stuff like that, but you can't guarantee that when you're in a mixed use project.
Right, but Claudia, a very good point. However, do we know the number of footprints that used to come to the store that was there before?
No, but it doesn't matter.
All right, so is the church still intending to bring in new members? Or they have a max of, we are only 100 members and we're not going to.
Okay, this is not a church.
Right, well, Bible
It's a
ministry.
It's a ministry, a
Right.
prayer room, and a place for people to, I think, for counseling and things like that.
Right.
It's not a church where they're having
Okay.
regular, what do I wanna say, like
Mass, you mean? Like-
services,
Worship
and
services.
worship services, right?
So, but we need to know what is the number of their congregation or whoever.
Well,
And
we
need
can
to-
ask that.
We need to know if they are planning to expand it, meaning bringing in new members. Because if they are, it could end up being 3,000, 5,000
No.
within 3 years or 4 years.
but that's something that's not a
So-
zoning issue, right?
No, but what I'm trying to say, that relates to traffic issue, parking issues. That's what I'm trying to get.
But there's the certificate of occupancy would be required, they wouldn't be able to have more
And
people.
But
the
they already-
space would limit that as well per occupancy loads,
Per
fire
unit.
loads.
I think if a church was bringing in that many members in today's climate, they would be looking for a bigger piece of land.
Sarah,
08 is only about 3,500 square feet.
is it your interpretation that the First Amendment requires Colleyville to permit churches or religious institutions in every zoning area?
No, I don't necessarily think that it does, however, there is case law that specifically says that the free exercise clause forbids subtle departures from neutrality. And that allowing permits of a secular nature, whereas not allowing them for religious nature, but when they're basically subject to the same type of traffic issues, all of those things, it can be a violation.
Because what we have here is a business project that was sold to the city back in the 1998, and it was designed for revenue producing businesses and residents. And it seems to me that given that concept now, that's a long time ago, it's changed, excuse me. It seems to me that putting a religious institution there is not consistent with that business plan.
Yeah, but really does change some of that the context of that. What they could have done in the 90s is not necessarily what can be done now under the law.
I would cite the
A
history.
lot greater discretion has to be given, and even a lot greater, I don't wanna say bending of the rules, but, higher rates of variances and things of that nature should be given, because that constitutional scrutiny that is applied when it is a religious
If
use.
somebody came up with let's say we're not Colleyville, because I don't think you're gonna see another in Colleyville, but we're Roanoke or wherever, and someone came up with this mixed use development, would they be required to permit churches within that commercial development, commercial residential development?
It would depend on the circumstances, but if it were consistent with the size, parking, the things that go into zoning, the specific with zoning, it would likely need to be allowed.
I think if you look at it historically, the original intent was to make this a commercial multi-use. The reality is that business plan has failed miserably since 1998.
Apparently it did.
And you look at we were to walk around right now, the vacancy rate down here, this is the best use to date we have of that piece of property. Should the business climate change, the property owner always has the right after lease expiration not to renew it if he could find something more lucrative to replace it with. That's purely a business decision at that point.
Right, that's not our decision.
No, and
Our
that's, we have,
decision is whether to expand the use of the permitted uses.
I understand that, but I think for the reasons that we've gone over, we need to allow it. Because we allow it in every other district, that's not a PUD. And number two, no one's coming knocking the door down saying, I want to rent that piece of property. So there is a business element that somebody's deriving rental income from it to pay their taxes.
Can I suggest we move on, because we're gonna run out of time if we're gonna.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, so this is the consideration of another PUD amendment. This is for the property located at 8060 Precinct Line Road. This is to allow for the office and medical office buildings. Since you guys did last see this, we did get some updated exhibits in terms of kind of what you guys were asking for. And so I'm just gonna kind of go through everything that you guys have seen at this point. But this is the original site exhibit, and so this is gonna give you kind of a comparison to the proposed site plan. So this is the original site plan showing the 3 pad sites, and this is kind of what you guys requested, showing the additional drive-through lot. And so at this time, what they're planning on doing is developing 2 of these, oh sorry, I went 1 too far back. The top 2 pad sites that you guys see, those are gonna be split into, rather than the 2 retail restaurant pad sites, it's gonna become 3 office pad sites. And then the southernmost drive-through restaurant pad site is gonna remain, it's just gonna be developed at a later time. And so in your packet, there should be a letter included from the southernmost property owner, Danny Souter. He's saying that he's intending to live in his parcel, which is that southernmost lot. And he's planning on residing on that, in that portion of the lot for the time being.
Now-
So
There's a house there, right?
there's 2 houses. The northern house is gonna be demolished, the southern house, the resident is planning on living there for the time being.
Okay, and so residential is part of this PUD?
It is not.
I wanna
That's-
understand how this works.
Yeah, that's an existing legal non-conforming structure, and so it can continue to remain until that property develops. So even though it's part of the PUD district, as long as the development doesn't encroach into the viable use of that structure and area, then it can stay. And so that's the,
Will it stay into the future? Will it have to come down at some point? It's not commercial.
so it would probably only come down whenever that area develops. And so that just depends on when it is sold.
Okay. So it doesn't conform to the PUDC, but it can stay there.
That's right.
Are we granting some special situation by approving a commercial PUD with residential dwelling on it?
It's just a purely existing legal non-conforming, so at one time it was legal conforming. Now that it's part of the PUD, it becomes non-conforming, and it can remain until it can't because of development on that area.
Okay, all right. Just hadn't seen that before. Want to understand it.
Yeah, kind of a weird situation, but regardless, they did give us some updates to these exhibits, so not much has really changed in terms of the amount of masonry. I did talk to the applicant. He's gonna talk to his architect to see if they can put something together showing more masonry. They just didn't have it in time for this meeting.
If you remember, they were proposing to only have 62%.
63%.
63%. But they'll be looking to comply with that 90% ratio that we require.
On the front at least.
Okay.
And then they did provide us this rendering as well.
Should we put that in the motion if we approve it?
Down to the 63%?
No, to the
To the
90%.
Yeah, depending on
Sure.
that conversation that you have with the applicant.
Okay.
And then these are just some of the exhibits that you guys have seen before regarding their drainage and grading, as well as their utilities and landscaping. This is a new exhibit, so this is a little more specific on the types of landscaping that they plan to install. And then they did provide us a tree survey as well as a tree preservation plan with the existing trees on the property. So we actually didn't receive any responses from any neighbors, but this is the wrong map, so that was just forgotten to be updated. And we're neutral, of course.
Questions? Okay, next.
So our next case will be a special use permit to allow for a daycare center at 4313 Colleyville Boulevard. And this is gonna be right next to Town Center Animal Hospital. It's currently CC2. There's the pictometry, and it's gonna be on that front portion of the lot. So there's kind of that street that divides it in the middle, and it'll be on the front portion closest to Colleyville Boulevard. That is the street view, and daycare centers just require special use permits in all commercial zoning districts. And we did receive a statement of planning from the applicant as well as a site plan and building elevations, floor plan, the drainage, their plan, and then the grading plan. They also gave us a landscape plan and tree preservation plan and utility. They gave us every plan. And we did not receive any letters for this case. And and staff is neutral.
No change since the last time they saw it, right?
No changes.
And that's adequate parking for that.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
No questions? Thank you.
Last is 6312 Colleyville Boulevard. They have not updated any information to us, but it's located here at the corner of Colleyville Boulevard. They're wishing to go from agriculture zoning to CC1 and to eventually build a couple of retail buildings here. They provided this is a conceptual site plan, and then they're building elevations to us. Some renderings to see what it would look like from the corridor and above. And they also provided the dumpster elevations and what the screening wall would look like and the materials. They also provided a large number of engineering information to us. And our city engineer is with us this evening, so when you have engineering specific questions, he'll be able to speak to these much better than I can. They've also given us a tree survey and a landscaping plan. City hasn't received any letters in response either way, and staff is neutral on the request. And I'm gonna go back to
Okay, so when we talked about this, we talked about some unusual drainage issues on this property. However, we're not approving any kind of development plan. We're only talking about zoning. So with that understanding, whatever questions you have concerning development would definitely be applicable for future development plans. But we're just talking about zoning right now. So if someone wants to go there, go right ahead.
I thought their package was very comprehensive. Probably one of the most comprehensive packages, because it talked about all the drainage, talked about the wildlife also.
Okay.
It was, like I said, probably one of the more impressive packages I've seen in a long,
Good.
long time.
Okay. Well, certainly, I'm not an engineer, and a lot of those questions have to be left to people with that expertise. Larry, is there anything we need to know?
So they have done the environmental engineering, that environmental engineering firm said that it would cost them $1 million to mitigate this wetland disturbance, changing the surface stream into an underground storm drain system kind of deal. Where that $1 million amount really comes from, I don't necessarily know. I don't know that the Army Corps has been approached at this point. That's the only concern that I really have is the relocation of this stream to an underground storm drain system. But again, this is just a zoning case. This isn't a development case yet.
Isn't the same issue, but it's not a development case yet, applicable to the Endangered Species Act kind of issues that were raised in the package?
And so the environmental firm basically said there are no endangered species at this site.
And does staff agree with that? Or is that not even relevant to what we're doing here tonight?
So from a zoning standpoint, I don't know that it is relevant.
Okay.
I think the biggest threat was to the turtles, if I read it correctly.
And when they redid the thing over there by Black Walnut, it was the beavers. The beavers were in there and they had to be, were they relocated? Were the beavers relocated?
they were eating the trees around the ponds. I remember that.
Okay. So we don't have to worry about the beavers or the rabbits or the coyotes.
So my thought on this is, and the questions, we have our site plan process that they will still have to go through. We won't be able to approve the site plan until
Army
Army Corps
Corps,
of Engineer has signed off on it and Larry's comfortable with the drainage improvements. And then everything else, we've gone through as a site plan review, And what you see are the response to those comments that we've given, and they're actually very good plans. I mean, these are, other than the drainage and other engineering issues, from a site planning perspective, it's very good.
They're ahead of the game in general.
Yeah, we have sufficient parking, the dumpster's in the right location, they're providing the screening wall adjacent to residential. We've got the 20-foot landscape easement along Colleyville Boulevard. So they've done pretty much everything that's required. The buildings are designed appropriately with articulation and masonry. And so it's just a matter of if you're comfortable enough to grant the CC1 zoning. They've pretty much put all the work in already. And if it is approved, and once they can get that resolved, the engineering part, they're really close to having an approved site plan.
Okay. Questions? Okay.
That's all we have, but the last thing is we need to see if we still want to meet for the work session on the 23rd.
And what do we have? How many cases do we have?
Right now, we've got about 2 or 3 that we know of. Our deadline isn't until next Monday, so we may
Okay.
get more in.
2 or 3 on the 23rd, or what was our alternative?
The 30th?
The 30th is another, that's just the next Monday.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and who was not available on the 30th? Brandon. Are the rest of you, as far as you know, available on the 30th? I can't remember about January. 23rd with the,
Doesn't matter to me.
okay.
I
Jerome,
don't know yet.
you don't know yet?
Yes.
Okay, but Brandon for sure on the 30th.
Right, I'm good for the 23rd and not for the.
Good for the 23rd.
23rd, I'm good. Or 30th.
I'm good. Well, we should have a quorum then. What do you all wanna do?
Okay, I'm not available.
Not available on either?
Yes. Yes.
Neither.
As long as
I guess we can keep it on the 23rd since that's the scheduled date.
Okay, we'll keep it on the 23rd.
Okay.
Okay? All right, well, I was remiss when we started and didn't welcome our new commissioner officially. So before we adjourn, we'd like to welcome David Ebert, our new commissioner. And David has lived here for 25 years. This is his first experience with serving on a city board. So we welcome you, David, and I'm sure that we'll all enjoy your company
Well, thank you very much.
and your expertise. So with that, we'll adjourn.